施錠をしたとはいえ、こんな古い木の扉なんて簡単に破られるだろうな。
After an episode like Takahashi's 114, anything that follows is gonna feel like a bit of a downgrade regardless. But taking that into consideration, this episode is still a bit of a mixed bag that doesn't quite come together on the whole. Stay tuned though, because there are still plenty of interesting surprises. Before jumping in, I want to give a quick shout out to Olympia's brand new print store. She is one of the strongest artists in this community, and I'm sure you've probably seen her work scattered throughout the internet. She's been a huge help to this channel by providing me with her own interesting insights into animators' styles, not to mention her contributions as far as materials go. If you like what you see, please do consider picking something up, maybe treat yourself or grab an early Christmas present for someone else. But without further ado, episode 115, this is supervised by two animators with great respect for the model sheets, Osamu Ishikawa and Hiroyuki Itai. With the exception of last week, I haven't spent too much time focusing on the supervisor's corrections, but this feels like a great opportunity to touch on things again. For those who don't know, a supervisor's job is to provide quality and consistency within an episode. They provide corrections of the key animator's work to either fix up art, movement, or even just, as I said, changing little details to add to the stylistic consistency of the episode. In Super, particularly early on, there wasn't masses of time available for corrections, so scenes would jump from style to style all the time, and while it's great to let animators' voices shine through, it's important not to take your audience out of the show. That's one of the huge benefits of this episode. Not only do Ishikawa and Itai have reasonably similar styles, their corrections are all over the place, creating one strong voice that gives the impression of polish, even if the animation doesn't necessarily back it up. Ishikawa seems to be getting much better at drawing Vegeta, even if he doesn't quite seem to understand how ears work, and Itai, whose noses were often a touch too large and eyes a fraction flat, appears to have also shared these traits. Both of them seem to be in a pretty good place right now, and this episode definitely benefits from it. Unfortunately, corrections can only take you so far, and the animation on display here certainly isn't Super's strongest output. Putting aside the disturbing fact that Toei's colossal industry-wide support studio, TAP, are the top credited key animators, the second highest here is Yukihiro Kitano, one of the series' weakest staff members. Kitano used to be an animation supervisor on the series, and you'll probably remember his work on episodes like 24, 45, and 62, but not for positive reasons, I'm sure. He appears to have been demoted down to a regular key animator for this tournament, not supervising anything in almost 20 weeks at this point. Whenever he does appear, his work is pretty heavily corrected. In this episode, he handles Toppo versus Vegeta in both halves of the episode. In Part A, he's corrected by Ishikawa, while in Part B, the corrections are a little less strong, but you can see MIYUKI Yokoyama's corrections kick in places. His biggest contribution is in the second half, where Goku and Kafla are going at it just before Goku starts to use Kaioken. It's pretty stiff, and while the chief animation supervisor Takeo Ide has corrected a great deal of the art, Kitano's traits do still shine through, which doesn't make for the most appealing of images. Ide's presence is surprisingly light in this episode actually. You can spot him in little pieces throughout, but he's certainly not his usual self. It's possible that, as I said, the regular supervision is strong enough not to require him, but I kind of suspect he's busy working on Yashima's upcoming efforts in episode 117. Thankfully, there are a few positives on the animation front in this episode. While I'm still not 100% sure on Jin Inaba's work, I suspect this little standout moment in the fight may have been his doing. It seems to match the general effect shapes that I've started to associate with him. Don't take this guess as gospel, but it's certainly possible. However, it's a newcomer to Super that I'd like to touch on the most today, and that is KATSUMI ISHIZUKA, a pretty significant name from One Piece back in the day. You'll probably know his or her work, it's a gender-neutral name, I have no idea, from Smoker vs. Virgo. Here he animates the scene in the first half where Goku backflips away and Kafla throws a ki blast, which leads into the two transformations. It's certainly not his best work by any stretch, but I appreciate how lovely his smoke looks, and of course the effects as things start to explode is relatively nice. Lastly, and I know this will get some people excited, Yuya Takahashi is on this episode. He's back already, but probably not how you'd expect. He's here handling some second ki animation, which is essentially a form of cleanup for those who don't know, and his focus is primarily on the final scenes of the episode as Goku unlocks Ultra Instinct again. Unlike his own episode where he channeled the older designs, Takahashi's sticking much closer to the character sheets, likely for the sake of consistency and probably time since his crazy shading can't be too fast to do. Hopefully this is an indication that he may be looking to stick around on Super for a while, but of course he is a freelancer, he's not associated with Toei officially, so only time will tell. Despite those few bits of good, this episode really just doesn't come together on the whole, as I said at the start. YOSHITAKA YASHIMA was the storyboard artist for this episode, and it's really quite good. There's a lot of unique angles in here. I really enjoyed the framing of the fights, and the re-reveal of Ultra Instinct was incredibly strong. The animation, as you've just heard, wasn't the best, but it was acceptable, especially when taking into consideration the great corrections from the supervisors. Along with Toshio Yoshitaka's script, this should have been a perfectly fine episode, but myself and many others all seem to have come away with a pretty distinct feeling of meh. There are two reasons for that in my eyes. Firstly, the art direction in this episode, aka the backgrounds, are just really not good. Last week, Super's best art director Bunsun Lee was responsible for the backgrounds, and his color palette was really dark and did wonders of creating a good atmosphere with the surrounding animation. It helped to sell the drama of that fight. This week, the art direction is from Shinzo Yuki, and their color work is significantly more saturated in comparison, which of course does change the tone, and the art doesn't really have quite the same depth. To top things off, the direction wasn't the best either. Takahiro Imamura, despite my fondness for many of his episodes, isn't the most consistent director in the world, and I feel like he really missed the mark here as far as creating a natural feeling episode. Jumping between the drama of the battle and the comedic moments on the sidelines is really awkward, if not jarring, and the music placement doesn't help either. By the time the instrumental version of Zenta's ultimate battle kicks in, it doesn't really feel like the scene deserves it, even putting aside the fact that the animation isn't really matching the excitement that track provides. It's just another example of a positive component of this episode just not being utilized correctly. Fortunately, next week should bring things back around. In my predictions video, I was really worried that Shuichiro Minabe may not be able to deliver this big return of Ultimate Instinct due to having very little time and working on another episode in between his own. Thankfully, those worries have been squashed thanks to OTSUKA tweeting that his work will appear next week. OTSUKA is the guy who animated Trunks slicing Zamas in half, along with a great scene in the current opening. Just knowing we've got at least one strong key animator involved definitely makes me feel much better. Hopefully it's a huge step up from this week. But that is it for now. Thanks so much for listening. I never really enjoy being negative about an episode. It's just not that much fun to talk about flaws for an extended period of time, but I do guess it's important to explain why an episode doesn't work than just ignore it completely. If you thought I did a decent job of explaining myself, then be sure to give the video a thumbs up. If you think I'm crazy, think I'm an idiot, then, you know, by all means leave a comment and let me know why. Consider subscribing if you're new. We've got a lot of interesting content coming up. I really appreciate everyone who came across from Geekdom 101 when we did that little collaboration just the other day. You guys have been so supportive and I really hope you stick around. Again, thanks so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed it and I will see you next time.